All right, should we get started? Welcome one and all to another episode of Object Podcast, a show featuring members of the Game Maker community. My name is Lazy Eye, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts Maceda and Seabass. Joining us as our guest this week is His Holiness himself, John Peterson, better known to us all as Pixelated Pope. Pope has been a staple of the Game Maker community for many years, known for his exceptional YouTube tutorials. Pope is also one of the longest-standing leaders in our community, hailing back to the days when this Discord existed as a Skype group, and now serving as one of its admins. On top of this, Pope has released a handful of professionally crafted tools to be used in Game Maker, including the ever-popular Retro Palette Swapper, and most recently, TrueState, a finite state machine system. Your Holiness, Bishop of GMS, Vicar of Game Maker, Successor of the Prince of the Games, Supreme Pontiff of the GM Discord, Archbishop and Metropolitan of the GMC, Servant of Servants of the Yo-Yo, welcome to the show.
Wow.
Man.
And for the record, John made me introduce him like that. He insisted.
Yeah, I was gonna get him demoted and kicked off the server if he didn't.
It was written into his contract when we signed him onto the show.
Yeah, I've also got a brandy glass full of brown M&Ms next to my computer. It's pretty great.
Yeah. He sent 3 cardinals to my house who made me sign in blood that I would address him as such every single time. But welcome to the show, John. It's a pleasure to have you on.
It's so good to be here. Like, I love what you guys are doing with this thing.
Thank you. We're really glad to have you on here. It's definitely something needed since we have had Sean, Cosmo, and Heartbeast on. We need to complete all of the grand tutorial makers in the GM universe.
It's funny to even be mentioned, along with Sean and Heartbeast and Cosmo. It's like...
I still, to this day, watch the Display and Resolution series because for whatever reason, display stuff and resolutions will never, ever stick with me. I can never figure it out. So I have visited those tutorials many a time. And I've also used your tools before. I remember I used the Retro Palette Swapper back when I was first getting started with GM, which seems to be a direction that you have been headed in a lot recently, is making tools for GM, which I can relate to a lot because as a game developer, my primary interests tend to lie in building systems and backends and larger scale stuff for games rather than the moment-to-moment gameplay things. Do you think that's a fair way to describe yourself as well?
Yeah, I mean... I definitely have a background in game design, but as I've gotten more and more into the coding side of things, I've found I've enjoyed that more than balancing numbers or building new levels or things like that. So whenever I sit down to like, oh man, I'm gonna build this new project, and this has happened many times over the last 10 years. I sit down and I make some really cool systems, right? And I always learn a ton while doing it. And I basically get the entire game done, save for a few features. And then it's just like, all right, time to build the game. Ooh, what's that over there?
Yeah.
and then I'm done. Yeah.
It's the perpetual game maker cycle is I'll make my own tools. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I do that a lot. I'll have an idea for a game. I'm like, oh, this would be a really, really good game. It would be really cool. And since it's like a personal project and I can take as much time as I want, like I build a really nice, cool framework and system for it. And then once that's done and like I have all I need to actually make the game, I find myself losing interest and like, oh, I want to keep building systems and stuff, which has encouraged me to build more and more tools for the marketplace and for the community in general. But as you probably know, there are a lot of challenges that come with that, and one of which is kind of actually nicely addressed by a question we got on Twitter from @Phoenix Gaming, who asks, is Yo-Yo Marketplace and other stores a good place as a career path? And can you make a living from releasing tools to make indie dev easier for others, or are those places rather for pocket money while working on the game?
Okay, so the short answer to that is no. No, you cannot make a living off of the marketplace.
You can't make groceries.
At least not in its current iteration. I mean, let's talk numbers. I have 2 of the top paid assets in the last 30 days. So I've got the palette swap shader, which is number 1, and True State, which just came out on Thursday or whatever, is up there at like number 12. So according to analytics, which, oh yeah, my movement engine isn't even on the top 30 anymore. It's slowed down quite a bit, which I'm okay with. I'm actually, I think that's due for an update. But I've sold 10 True States and about 15 palette swappers, right, in 30 days. Mm-hmm. And then Yo-Yo takes their 30% cut. And yeah, you're looking at like maybe $2 a day, maybe.
And furthermore, unlike other platforms, you can't receive any money that you make on the marketplace until you hit $100. Then you can initiate a payout to go to your account after the 30% is taken out of it.
So that's $100 after the 30%. So you're really having to make, 130, 140 something.
Exactly. Well, because that was the kind of thinking I was doing when Topher and I released Lazy Load. We had put it on Itch originally, which is a super easy platform to manage analytics and to do payouts and to advertise and build a custom page. It's everything I want in terms of a platform to release my tools on. But I really wanted to release to the marketplace as well because I was told that we could have one of those featured banners on the front page. Where it's like, okay, that might be really good for marketing. That might actually bring in some sales. Maybe I should put it on there as well. And the process that it took me to get that on there was very difficult. For one, the tool itself is very large. So we had to create a launcher and a downloader, like patching tool for it so it could be small enough to upload. And even after we jumped through all those hoops and got it up there, I took it down because we had gotten one sale after a week of it being on there on the front page. And I looked at the dashboard that shows you payouts and everything, and I realized Lazy Load is a $10 tool. Yo-Yo takes 30% of that. I have to make, after their cut, $100 before I can even get paid. That's more than 10 copies that's not going to be sold on the marketplace. It's just, it's not worth it. So we just are now just on Itch.
So we're playing both sides here. The standard publishing cut in the entire industry is 30%. That's standard across every platform. So just to defend them a little bit.
Yeah,
I think the issue really is that they don't have a lot of consumers in general, and that GM's built off of a community of people that are like, the tool should be free. Game Maker's too expensive. It's $30 on sale. So you can imagine why the tools don't sell nearly as well either.
That's a totally fair thing. I mean, Unity, for example, they have a fantastic asset store. They take 30% as well. That bit I'd be totally fine with it if I get in return what I'm kind of expecting. If I feel like the marketplace is a really, not necessarily quick, but it could be one of like the quickest paths to really expanding GM. That's always been my stance, is opening things up to the community, let people have direct plugins to the ID, let people do all this stuff. But there needs to be a good platform for that. And the marketplace is kind of broken and weird. Like I know right now analytics are not working or something. And there's just not a lot of people that go on there. And I don't think users know about it enough. If the marketplace was something that users were like, brought to and shown like this is part of using GM is using fantastic things created by other people, I think that would be really great for the community, and I think more people would be encouraged to build awesome systems and tools.
Yeah, I completely... In fact, I was thinking about that because I knew this conversation was coming up. It's like, how many clicks does it take to find the marketplace and in GMS2? And you've got the first problem, which is the primary users of the GM marketplace are usually going to be newer developers. And so many of the assets out there are like... they're huge, right? They're entire engines. They're super complex, and so and the ones that are deserving of like the really complicated ones, they're $10, $20, and a developer who's brand new either has the expendable income and doesn't have the new knowledge and is going to buy that and not know how to customize it for themselves, or they're such a new developer, a younger developer that doesn't have expendable income, and it's like, I just spent X amount of dollars on Game Maker Studio. I'm not going to buy this.
Yeah, I think in an ideal scenario for an asset marketplace like this, the question that developers have to ask themselves shouldn't be, is this going to be worth the time and effort I put in? Are people even going to, buy this? Is it even going to be seen by anyone? But rather like just a question of how good of a product they can make and trust that it will find the people that it needs. And, just to draw comparisons to other platforms like Itch, for example, is really, really good. I don't even know how the process for it works, but they're very good at promoting and featuring tools that are good or popular in games as well. Sebastian, you've had 2 games that you've released, and when you put them on Itch, they were featured on the top of the front page both times, right?
So some stuff that's worth saying is I have stuff on the marketplace and I have stuff on Itch for tools. Both have come up a little above $200 now, but the difference is I have games on Itch. So the marketplace for me has actually sold more than I've sold on Itch. My tools don't sell on Itch almost at all. I will say that I don't do anything to advertise them or make the art attractive for them or anything. They're really it's just good code, really. But on the marketplace, I've done really well, apparently. But the only thing I really sell in there is like $30, so I sell one of those, every few months, and you kind of make up the difference. The problem with Itch really is that there's too much there, and it's kind of like the Google Play Store. It's an open market. It's not very controlled.
Right.
So it's a matter of self-advertising, though. You got to drive the market to your page. But if you do that, Itch is a great platform.
I think another part of where there could be improvement for the GM tool community from everyone else's side, not necessarily the developers, is that there's a big difference in attitude I've found between game maker developers and other engines and platforms. When I dabbled a little bit in Unity and spent some time in their community, just getting a feel for things, I was watching a basic tutorial to see, okay, how does this engine work? And one thing that stuck with me was the tutorial maker said, like, okay, in the description below I have a script for all player movement and jumping, and basically what the first couple of tutorials in a game maker tutorial series lead you through. And he's like, just use this because you shouldn't waste your time on it. We should do more important things. And my initial reaction is like, what? No. Like that's like the most important fundamental things, is that you should learn how to do those things. They're important. And then the more I thought about it, the more I saw his point. It's because in Game Maker, we build a lot of systems from scratch, and we're trained. I feel like my experience has been that we're trained to want to do things all from scratch. But in other places, it's much more common to use an asset store, use a marketplace to just, get templates and engines and scripts to do the basic things for you, so you don't have to waste your time doing it, so you can actually build the parts of your game that make your game your game. And that's not for everyone, but it does place a much higher value in frameworks and assets versus other things.
That's common pretty much on any like programming language, right? If I'm working in C# and I Google a problem and Stack Overflow is like, here's a class that does exactly what you want, thanks, I'm done. I don't even have to look at it. If it does what I want. And I think that's more with like the reason it's so much easier to use code from somebody else or use entire systems from somebody else in a more sophisticated language is probably due to like namespaces and being able to compartmentalize things. So if you bring in a library that has 10,000 functions and methods in it, you don't need that in every single, that doesn't show up in your autocomplete in your IntelliSense every time you're typing, right? It's you just file it away and bring it in when you need it. And that is so much harder to do in GM because every system you bring in is either an extension that adds 100 functions or something like TrueState that adds like 20 scripts to your script directory. And so, yeah, there's this, and then you have to use it exactly right. Like it'll add variables, again, not scoped to this new system that, you have to have your object will be tracking these variables or new global variables, and everybody can do it differently and there's no standardization. Yep. So tracking down issues with that specific thing is going to be so much harder in GM than it would anywhere else.
I think there's also an aspect of the package management, because coming from Python or coming from Node.js, installing a different library is literally as simple as going into the command line and typing pip install package name or npm install package name. And with GM, you've got the marketplace, you've got itch.io, and you've got other places like GMC forums where you can find code. There isn't a centralized repository of all of the cool stuff content. So I think we lack the namespace stuff, and we also lack the package management aspect.
Yeah,
Right.
Something that I think would solve all this, and one of our community moderators, Ariak, just pointed this out. GameMaker has a behind-the-scenes sort of plugin system, and so you have like the object window, for example, in your code window, and like all the drag and drop. That's all stuff technically we should have access to. Unity does that really well, actually. That's one of the things I think why you can drag in a completely new asset off the store and immediately use it, is that it's just checkboxes. It's like completely separated systems. But because GameMaker doesn't have anything like that, it's always code-wise. You know, there's no, oh, let me just check a box and this will disappear. No, you have to like dig through code and figure out why it's not working with your particular system. But yeah, that comes down to standardization, I imagine.
Yeah, and Arag mentions that we can't have our own libraries. We can't have our own sort of asset packs without going through the marketplace.
Right.
Yeah, and there's been attempts before, many attempts before, to build a sort of package management system to do so. And it's not impossible. There's a lot of challenges that rise from it. And personally, my stance on it since I tried it once has been like, I could build it, the community could build it, and I'm sure they could do an incredible job doing it. But it's just one of those things I really just want YYG to do. I really wanted to see it built directly in without us having to do any hacky solutions or anything.
I do think we should switch off to John's stronger topic, which is tutorials, because someone has pointed out we've been ranting about this for 20 minutes, and I do feel like we might be beating on YYG a little more than necessary.
Sure.
Yeah, if we're going to move on, I kind of want to wrap this up with kind of my primary advice for the marketplace. Making assets is not going to make you a live. You're not going to make a living. Like, my total publisher cut to date after almost 3 or 4 years on the marketplace is less than $2,000, right? And for mostly just 2 assets, which is pretty great. That's like, I can probably pull up the exact numbers. But what I've been doing is always something for myself. And then I put a little bit extra work into it to make it consumable by someone else, right? And that's kind of my goal, is every time I start making a new project, I get something useful out of it that I want to use in another project. And I just split that out, polish it up, put it on the marketplace. And when those checks come in, they come in. When they don't, who cares? This is not something I'm relying on. It's just a cool thing to show up in my PayPal every couple of months. And eventually, maybe I'll have like 10 assets down there, and I will finally sit down and say, I'm going to build a damn game, and I'm going to import all of my assets, and I'm going to be right there ready to like do everything.
Right.
So that's kind of the mindset I would expect people. Do something for yourself. If you really think you've got something that other people can use in their projects, remember, everybody's got their own project that they want to build, especially in GameMaker. Like, we're all just trying to chase our dreams here. Starting with a giant pack is risky because they may have already started their project and it may not fit your vision close enough, or your pack close enough, that you're limiting your market by doing something so big.
Yeah.
And another thing that I want to point out is, unlike some other things that have been discussed in the community before that even I've talked about, the marketplace is one area where it's not, I don't feel myself like I'm actively mad at YYG or I think they're doing something wrong. I see it more as like, this is like an untapped gold mine. Like right now it's not great, it's not awful, it's just not utilized to what it potentially could be. It's not something that I'm upset about, but more so I'd be really excited to see what would be possible if we had a platform that could maybe better cater to things.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Hopfrog did post his values.
Yes, I do have those here.
It'd be worth, I think, shouting out, because it's quite privileged information, I think, sharing these.
It is, yeah. So Hopfrog shared in the chat while we were talking about analytics and things, his overall analytics that he's had on his itch account. Let me scroll, because he said there was a few things that he wanted to point out before sharing these, is that this is over 2 years of revenue. Forager has been featured on the front page almost every single month, and more than half of the traffic always comes from external sites, mostly YouTube. And he says, my thought is that the donation model is not good to support devs making a living off of itch, or maybe the consumer base is just not big enough. And with that perspective, to read you these numbers, Forager has had 203,000 downloads. It has had 421,000 views. And out of all of those, there's been 1,185 payments, going up for a gross total of $5,757. While those numbers are huge, and to me, who has only made like small tools on itch, those numbers are exciting to see. Considering that there's been almost 500,000 views, but only 1,000 some payments, it does point out that, yeah, the donation model isn't exactly a reliable source of income.
Yeah.
All right, we can move on to another topic. People expressed interest, of course, in hearing about your tutorials, Pope, and you have made a number of tutorials on YouTube that have been very helpful to people. So I'm interested to hear what first got you started, as we've asked everyone else. What first got you started in making tutorials for GameMaker?
Well, probably I started on the subreddit. I think I posted one about how cool LERP was back like, I have no idea how old that one is. And then I was really active on the subreddit for a while and answering a lot of questions, and that would result in, somebody saying, I'm using room persistence. And then I'd just go off and say, no, here's a save system that you can use. And people responded really well to it. They were like, wow, this is so cool. And so I started I think Sean said something like this. I'm not a good programmer, right? You know what? I am a good programmer. I am not a good technical programmer, though. I'm good at, I've got the core skills that a programmer needs, which is being able to solve problems, right? You see a problem, you know what tools you have in front of you with, GameMaker and everything it's capable of, and you just build a solution. And it's that power to answer your own questions. And I thought, since I don't come from a super technical programmery background, and I've been able to figure this stuff out for myself, maybe others would benefit from the way I approach these problems. And that turned out to be true, I think. And people have really enjoyed my written tutorials, my video tutorials, and mostly it was just, I was really active in the community answering questions, and I got really tired of answering the same questions, especially the really complicated ones, over and over again. And I said, right, I just want to drop a link and just say, go watch this, go read here, and that's kind of how it started.
So it's been a little bit over a year since your last tutorial that you've uploaded to YouTube, but I know that you've said recently on Twitter that you're interested and you're planning on getting started up again, and you're really excited you have a new series or a new episode in your series that you're developing. I'm interested to hear as to what initially made you fall out of wanting to make new tutorials and what it is that has gotten you excited to do so again.
This is kind of sneak peek of my next video, actually, because I was actually going to, so I want to do kind of a state of the channel. Where was I? Why was I? Just like what's been going on for the last year. Right. And I think the biggest problem with video tutorials is they're permanent, right? Opinions change, methodologies change, you make mistakes, and there's no way to correct that besides putting some errata in the description. Yep. But that's just there forever, and people keep using it, and you're like, no, this isn't accurate anymore. Don't use global var, please. I was an idiot. I've changed my mind. I've changed my ways. I've repented. Yeah. Right. And it's so frustrating to see those sort of things out there, especially like the step by step code kind of tutorials where they walk along, right? And it's just like, it's so easy to make mistakes. But the biggest issue was the time investment, because I really wanted to respect the viewer's time, right? I would research heavily in any topic I was looking into doing a tutorial on, to make sure I really did have the best way to do this, and that it was a way that anybody could apply to their projects. And then I would spend hours testing, writing scripts, writing up demo projects, and then again, because I wanted the highest quality, I was kind of obsessed with it, I would record my audio completely separate from my clicking and typing on the screen.
Yeah.
So I'd record one, get really nice quality audio, then record the video, and then, oh man, I can't tell you how tedious it was to try and sync those things up. The editing process for a 10-minute video was 8 to 12 hours of just the most tedious stuff you can imagine as far as editing goes.
I can relate.
Right.
And that it just wasn't sustainable. You know, I've got a full-time job. You know, I'm married. I've got a dog. You know, it's just I've got responsibilities. I've got friends. And it's you know, carving out that much time where I'm literally in my office with my headset on and just like zoned in and just completely ignoring everything else about my life. It wasn't going to work. So I really enjoyed it, and man, the response that I've gotten from the community from these tutorials and videos and you know, little articles I've written for Reddit, and it's been amazing. Like, you always hear about the cancer that is YouTube comments,
Right.
but I think of like, I'm always in my answering comments. Even today, I'm still answering questions about videos that are 3 years old, and it's always been positive. There's been like maybe 2, 3 just trolly, obviously jerk comments.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like that's what's exciting. Like, I love helping people, and I still feel like the niche I was trying to fill with that kind of not super beginner. You got your Heartbeast, you got your Sean, you got Cosmo. Like those, if you're a beginner in Game Maker, your cup runneth over, right?
Yeah.
There's so many resources. But if you're beyond the point where tutorials just aren't doing it for you, you get bored going to any of these tutorial makers because you're beyond that point. You know how to solve your own problems, but you don't know what you don't know almost. Like, you want to see what other people who've been using Game Maker for a long time do, not to show beginners how to do it, but to do it for their own projects and how they architect things and how they solve problems. And I think I still think that hole exists in the tutorial environment, and I'd really like to be there and show those people who are really starting to come into their own as developers what else they can do.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain that was one of the things that we actually discussed when we were first talking about the podcast, is that there's this gap in where you go or how you go about learning Game Maker. Whereas when you're a beginner, like you said, there's so much out there. Like, you have every resource you could ever need. And then you eventually get to a stage where you know Game Maker well enough and you just understand programming to a certain degree that you can figure things out on your own through doing your own independent research and also just experimenting. But there's a place before that where you're intermediate, but you're not quite independent, let's say, and there aren't a whole lot of tutorials or resources out there that can help you once you're at that spot. Because it's easy, and I understand it, and it's something I've learned through making tools, is that the biggest target audience to hit in Game Maker is the brand new user. Because in any tools that I've made that are kind of something a more intermediate or higher user would find use in, you know, I noticed that while they're appreciated, they're not widely used and popular. And I think that's just because the majority of people are in the newer category. But there is this gap for learners who are in that intermediate zone. And I do think that your videos actually hit those a lot. I mean, looking over here, we have cameras and parallax scrolling and resolutions and rotated rectangle collisions. And I always want to see more content in that area. But as you said, It's a huge investment. I tried making a course for Udemy about a month ago, and I'm not done with it, but I've set it aside because it's so much work. I was scripting it and writing it out, and then I was like, oh God, do I try reading the script as I actually type it, or do I try syncing it? And then you begin to like second question yourself as a programmer with every line you write. It's like, I think I tweeted that day, like, I've never been more self-conscious in my code than trying to write a tutorial. I'll like write my demo and be like, oh, is this the best? I don't know, because it's set in stone. So with that knowledge that you've acquired from doing it, and with these ideas of what you want to do, are you able to share a bit of what your plans are going forward? I know you said that you're going to have that update video, but is there a different direction that you want to take the channel in? Is there a different plan, a different way you want to approach it starting again?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point. I know what I was doing before. I'm super proud of the videos I put out,
right.
But that level of quality just isn't sustainable with the way my life is, right? So we gotta compromise. It's like when you start saying quality over quantity, when the quantity is zero, the quality probably needs to come down a little bit.
Right.
But I still want to respect the viewer's time. I still want to try and solve that problem of this is permanent. And so the goal is that I will actually be mostly focusing on written tutorials that can be updated, fixed, corrected with, and in such a way that anybody who's new that stumbles upon the tutorial will get the latest, the greatest, none of my mistakes, and all of the detailed code and example projects and things like that. And the videos will be more for people who don't need the code, right? They just want to know. I mean, I'm just thinking back to when I started out with GM. I was in GM7 and building this, top-down action RPG, and my character could attack and run and roll and do all these things that right now it's like finite state machine. I didn't have a finite state machine. I didn't know what a finite state machine was.
Right.
And all it took was me stumbling upon, I want to say it was Ace's Zero engine, which is a throwback for all the veterans out here. That was huge, right? And he had a finite state machine in there, and I looked at it and I was like, whoa, I had no idea. Like the way of organizing this had never even occurred to me, right?
Right.
And his system was super complicated, or at least it was to me at the time. And so I'd start building my own. And then slowly over time, it became, you know what? I understand why it was so complicated now. Like, there was no way I was going to realize why it needed to be this complicated until I built my own and started to try and solve problems with that system. And it's like, oh, now I need this. Oh, now I need this. And so that's kind of where I want to attack with the YouTube channel is what are people doing that are just a different way of thinking about solving specific types of problems, finite state machines, steering behaviors, these concepts that exist in game development as a core, right? Not just in Game Maker, but everywhere.
These are patterns, right?
Yeah, design patterns, and they're those things that you don't even know what you're looking for. And so that's kind of where I want to be. And maybe I'll do a big full tutorial if there's a topic that really seems like it would hit the full audience, the intermediate and the beginners, and maybe even some advanced people or a little beyond tutorials. But that's the plan right now, is complex, detailed written tutorials with a companion video that's easy to consume.
If it does well, which I'm sure it will, I think it'll be great to show other people that that's a viable way to create more content tutorials. Because I find that more advanced users are more inclined to share their knowledge if they can just kind of do so in a tech blog or a written format. As examples, Yellow Afterlife writes plenty of write-ups on his website that are extremely useful and knowledgeable. Another one that comes to mind is Ariak's Z-tilting tech blog that he wrote for Yo-Yo Games. Those are like high-level, really valuable pieces of information that are much easier to both create and to edit later when needed, it could usher in, a whole lot more content for GM users to be able to learn from.
It is very difficult to copy code from a video, especially if you scan through the video for the right code and then realize that 5 minutes after that point,
they fixed the bug.
The person goes back and edits it.
Yeah. Which happens a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, speaking of that Ariax Z tiling thing, I think that is the level beyond where I'm pointing.
Right.
That is, okay, so you've got the people who are just learning GM, right? You need to learn about how H speed, V speed, speed, direction, how they all interact. You need to learn about place meeting. You've got the really core set of functions that every game maker developer needs to know. And then it's like, okay, now I know how to use GameMaker. How do I really build a game with this knowledge without getting overwhelmed? And that's where I want to try and sit, which is kind of ironic being that I've never finished a project. And then Ariac and Yal's tutorials kind of go beyond that to the point of, all right, you're invested in GameMaker. Here's what it can really do if you really get your claws into it and really start pushing it to its limits. I think that's amazing, and that's definitely, like I said, I'm pretty good at figuring out problems. I'm not very technical. Ariac's tutorial kind of makes me a little dizzy, and and even the one that Chuck and Juju worked on for the silhouettes that were colored and everything like that. Like even that tutorial is like, wow, this is intense stuff. But it's so cool to see people pushing GM like that and making that knowledge available to those who really are invested in this platform and want to get the most out of it.
So I'm going to segue us towards an interesting question that we had on Twitter. Before I do so, I'll remind everyone that's joining us live that if you have any questions for John or us in general, feel free to put them down there and tag me in it, and we'll be sure to ask them. You mentioned a minute ago how you've never finished a project of your own, and yet at the same time you have all this passion and excitement for the tutorials and resources you're going to be creating. At some point down the line, do you see yourself, or do you hope to find yourself making a full game or a full project of some kind? And what would that look like?
I mean, honestly, this is something I've been thinking about a lot very recently. As I'm starting back into the tutorials and releasing True State. And yeah, I mean, I definitely want to make a game. It's just building that plan of, and I'm sure Seb can kind of attest to this, if you want to release a project, it's a dedication. You treat it like a 9-to-5 job. You and maybe even more so. It requires a lot of dedication, and working on it in front of the TV for an hour a night isn't going to cut it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've got some plans. I don't know how my job is going to feel about this. I actually need to talk to my boss about this. I'm planning on saving all of my vacation for next year until December and taking the whole month off.
Ooh.
And so I've got a year to prepare for basically a month-long full-time game jam for myself. And the goal is to have a Steam releasable game by January 1st.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
I'm going to enjoy following this.
Like, that's the thing, is if I'm working on it 8 hours a day, I could stream it. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be working. We could do it live. And game dev streams are kind of so-so, right? They're like, I mean, it's fun. Like, I've been watching Grog's stream, and that's a lot of fun. He does a really good job of saying, you know what? This is busy work. I'm going to put it off. I'll do it off stream. Let's be entertaining. Let's do some cool stuff.
Right.
But I wouldn't be able to do that because I'd literally just be blitzing through this, trying to get as much of my game as possible done. But yeah, I could, because I'm going to be sitting in front of my computer anyway. So why not stream it for if this new reboot to my channel works and people would be interested, then I don't see a problem with it.
Game dev streams are challenging. I've watched plenty of Grog streams as well, and they're very entertaining, and he does a great job of keeping entertainment as a large goal in it. I've also streamed a lot with Sebastian, Seb, I think you have a very different approach to streaming. It's more so like, this is you working, you're going to be working for the day, and you're streaming it so other people can hang out and watch if you want, but it's kind of just like a chilled co-working channel.
Yeah, it's a co-working environment. Yeah, it
Right.
depends on what you're trying to do. Like, I've definitely gone down the route of let me just only work on entertaining things. But if you're working consistently on a project, honestly, it's next to impossible to stream at the same time. It's already so draining, like emotionally, and
Right.
I mean, your creative fluids will run short very quickly, and top that off with you're trying to entertain people with streaming. It's very challenging. I'm not discouraging it. I think it's a great way of marketing. It's a good way of building a community, and it's a good way to hold yourself to like a standard, because when there's like eyes on you, I think you have to work a little harder on your project to kind of maintain that standard. I don't know. That's what it was for me. I don't do that now though.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think it varies greatly depending on what kind of a person you are. Like Seb is able to focus and do both. Whenever I join the stream, I am talking the entire time to either Seb or the audience, and I get nothing done. Yeah. And when I've, for the GM48 that I did most recently, I streamed the first like 8 hours of it. And I had to end it. I'm like, I've got nothing done. I'm just talking to everyone. It was okay, but I definitely picked up the pace once I stopped streaming. I think everyone is different with it, and you have to find the balance of entertainment and productivity that works for you. It's exciting that you were mentioning that you're going to be working on a game, because we have a question from Twitter that asks, question for Pope, or in general: as an indie game developer, being indie means no major studio to answer to. Would you still limit yourself if the public sees your product and tries to block your creativity, or would you not care and keep your vision intact? That question came from @6nahal6.
So, I mean, that question needs a little bit of interpretation, because there's a lot of ways to interpret my creative vision. Mm-hmm. I mean, and as people are always posting their projects on the server and getting feedback, and we're like, there could be that one that's like, why is your game so complicated? Like, everything looks so, overdone. You don't need it to be like this. Just this is distracting. This is distracting. I don't care about my characters' wear on their bottom of their shoes. And that's one angle of, like, you've built these super complicated systems that maybe don't belong in the game that you seem to want to make. And that's just kind of like either being honest with yourself, or taking feedback constructively and really holding yourself accountable to your vision, and like, is this what I want? Is this the best thing for the game?
Yeah.
And so that's hard to answer. It's like, if you know that tread wear meter on the side of the screen for your shoes is going to be vital for how the kind of feeling you want your game to give the player, then stick to it, right? But it's all about being honest to yourself. The other way it could be interpreted is like, nobody wants this game. Why are you even making this game? Then I'm kind of the opposite of Hop on this. I think Hop's advice is probably the most financially sound. Like, you react to the market. You want to put a product out that everybody wants, or as many people as possible wants, and this is how you're going to make your living. You're a slave to the market and the opinion of the community, the gaming community, Steam, whatever's popular. Not that you need to jump on the train and try and, build the next, your version of Flappy Bird, right? That's not always the right way. But if your game is going to be super niche, and then, it's going to be hard to make a living. But then every once in a while, you've got your Gun Points, your Stardew Valleys, your Undertale, right? These games, they weren't following, they were trendsetters, right? And that is a lottery, right? You've got as much chance of winning the Powerball as you do releasing a brand new game with zero following, with zero hype, just generated by the fact that you're making it, and getting any sort of traction, right? So that's actually where I am. Like, if I'm going to make a game, it's going to be the game that I've always wanted to stay up late playing with my friends, or just by myself, or whatever. And, I'm not trying to make a living off of this. I'm unless I accidentally pull a Tom Francis and the game sells 1 billion copies and I never have to have a regular 9 to 5 job again. That's not my goal, right? Like that, it's not what I'm expecting to happen by releasing a game. I'm doing this for myself primarily, and if people enjoy it, then awesome.
I think it's important because you're right. Like, if you want to survive in game dev, especially nowadays, as an indie, you are a slave to the market. Like, you need to target what's popular, and that can go into platforms, and it goes deeper than that. But I think the key point with games like Gunpoint and Heat Signature and Stardew Valley and Undertale is that they're all accessible to everyone. That's really the common ground you'll see. Forager, all these games that take off and do really well, they're just accessible. It's not necessarily that they like hit a specific niche or that they follow a specific trend. Rivals of Aether, which is really popular, that's a very niche market in general, but it's doing ridiculously well and out of nowhere. Like, you don't see fighting games like that come out and actually do that well, especially not out of the indie scene with like what seemed like no marketing. I don't know, that's what my takeaway has been. But you're right, it really is still luck at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of my feelings on it, is like, you know, Seb, you obviously would be able to speak on this because you're a workhorse, right? You release as many good real games as some studios release anime dating sim, you know, the holy trinity of nudity, sexual content, and anime.
Visual novels. Yeah.
So it's like some of those studios are releasing 4 games a year, and I mean, obviously you're not at that clip, but
that'd be a
the
challenge,
quality is so. Yeah, I mean, you'd probably be better to answer this question because I've never released anything, and I'm not trying to make a living and a go at this. So I'm just building for myself, and if somebody plays my game at SDGQ or whatever, or SGDQ, yeah, then that's super exciting for me. But it's not like why I'm doing it.
Right, exactly, and that's the distinction, though, right? If you're making games because you enjoy making games, great, good on you. Understand that you're probably not going to make it. If you're making games because you enjoy making games as a byproduct of making money, like, great, do that. You know, you have to sort of like, you're just doing it because you enjoy it enough to make a living out of it. But at the end of the day, it's still a job. There's going to be sometimes months on end where it sucks. But if you're making a game because you really enjoy that process and you enjoy what you get out of it more than the financial returns or, you know, what the marketing involves or whatever, you know, it's just about knowing what you want to do from the get-go. I see a lot of mix-ups in that in the GM community. A lot of people doing like I'm trying to, how do I word this? Fan games, let's say, that have this idea that, oh, if this fan game takes off, I'll make millions. And it's like, no, you need to understand you're doing this for you. Not a lot of people are going to want this. But, you know, if you're happy, that's fine. It's not a problem. You shouldn't be ashamed of yourself. You don't have to make money to be an indie dev. That's not the point.
Right, just like it depends on your intentions and what you want out of it. I think a lot of people can assume they want to be like a full-time indie developer and don't realize that it's just as fine and just as cool to do it in your free time, you know, to have it be a hobby and a passion for you. And that enables you, if it's not something you're relying upon for income, that enables you to be able to just do whatever you like, to be able to say, like, I want to make the game that I wish I had growing up. And if that's not your thing, then that's fine. The challenge that arises when it's your job and you have to rely upon it, and, you know, the game's success marks your success, is then you do have to take into consideration what the market wants, if they'll like it, what the feedback you get, even if you disagree with it. I think my personal stance, I was actually just talking with someone this morning about, you know, the challenges of having a game that means a lot to you in an artistic sense. Like, it's what it is. It's something precious to you and you want to make it the way you envision it. But if there's like a core problem with how the market will receive it, then it should be addressed if it's going to be a game that you're relying upon. But I don't think that should always necessarily be seen as like an obstacle, like something you have to be like, well, I have to sacrifice my creative vision in order to make this something that the market will want. I'd rather view it personally as a challenge to say, okay, well, accepting that that's an issue, but putting it aside right now, let me look at this area of my game and just creatively think about it. Like, how can I just make it better in general? And then as I develop ideas in that area, I can look at each one and say, does this one subsequently fix that issue with the market and what people want? And then at the end of the day, you have a win-win situation, because rather than just trying to put a Band-Aid over the issue, you've made your game better and subsequently fixed an issue with it. And I think it can often work out that way, because if there's something about your creative vision, what you want for your game, that you know that general audiences aren't going to like, they probably won't like it for a reason. That might be an indicator that there's something better you can do anyway. So that's personally where I see that tasty middle ground, where like right now, what I'm relying upon is contracts and, working on other projects. And my own projects, while I would want them to become something I do full time, they don't necessarily have to be. So I'm in that weird middle zone. And I coming out of a life of art and theater and really being an artistically focused person, I never want to personally have to sacrifice my vision, but rather see it as a challenge to just improve it overall and see if you can fulfill both categories.
Right. Yeah. That's the best form of indie dev, is when you're satisfied with yourself and you can survive off of it, which very few people do. Coming from my own experience, at least.
I think it's worth considering that you could take that concept and get a job that's not specifically in game dev, but in some other software development. You would benefit not only from a salaried job, but you also develop your programming skills, which is useful in game dev. I think it's worth considering for some people.
I mean, that's where I am, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
I started in game dev and then moved to just like testing and software. And then because my hobby of game programming kind of taught me those initial skills, I was able to push my way into a more development position and in my actual job. And like, it kind of just goes back and forth. Like, as I'm working in software, which is so much easier than building games sometimes, the like things I learn out there, I find myself applying back to game development, and then the other way around. Like, I just built shaders to use in my WPF applications, and that was because I understood how shaders work from GameMaker and applied them to my job and got some cool stuff out of it. So
yeah, I think the more programming you do, the more different kinds of programming you do, the more synergies you find between different techniques and in what you're doing.
yeah.
Any community questions? Do we have any?
Yeah, feel free to ask any questions to anyone in the audience right now. Can you dunk the cookie?
I have dunked the cookie. I have done it.
Baku asks, what is your favorite color?
Green?
Green, good.
Makes sense.
Ariak asks, how did you first pick up GM in the first place?
Okay, I've told this story a few times, but I can blitz through this pretty fast. I was reading on, so as I'd mentioned many times already, I exited my game development job as our studio collapsed in spectacular fashion, and I wanted to make games, right? I still loved game design and stuff like that, so what could I do? And I was reading Destructoid, and they had a feature on Project AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake, which was being built in GameMaker. And I looked at a video of it and I was like, holy crap, this is incredible. And then I read the interview with him and he's like, I'm not a programmer. I'm just building this. I have no idea what I'm doing. And that was it. It was like, this guy says he's not a programmer and that looks like a Metroid game. I need to check this software out. And, I went and bought GameMaker 7 for $20 and haven't looked back. That was the game, that was the project that got me into game development. And just recently, like last month or so, I learned that the GMS version of AM2R uses my retro palette swap shader for the different Samus suits.
Wow.
And when I learned that, which I unfortunately learned because I was looking for a bug or an error that my palette swapper can throw, and I found somebody else in the AM2R experiencing that. The subreddit was experiencing that same issue, and I was like, "Hey, that's my air. That's cool. They're
That's
using
really
my
exciting.
thing.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, we have a question coming from Sam, who asks, "What effect has keto had?" Is that how you pronounce it? Keto, the
yep,
diet.
keto.
Okay, what effect has keto had on your productivity and mental health?
Oh man, like I love keto. Like when I go back to eating just crap and not paying attention to what I eat is really what I should say. There is a huge difference in just my mental state and just general energy level, stuff like that. I'm such a zealot for keto.
I'm actually unfamiliar with what it is. Could you explain?
Yeah, for any, obviously, keto, it stands for the ketogenic diet, but there's a r/keto, the subreddit.
Right.
Check it out if you're interested in improving your diet, and it is really cool.
Awesome. We have a question from Topher, who says, "How do you feel about the current state of GM and YYG in general, with the, in parentheses, slow speed at updates to software? Do you think this affects the efficiency of using GM or the viability of using it in the future as compared to other and upcoming 2D game-making platforms?"
I think it really depends on what you're hoping to get out of the software. If you are a professional like Seb, or somebody who really wants to make a living developing games, then I would be really frustrated personally with the tool, like the updates that are coming out, and that's GameMaker though. GameMaker is a beginner's tool, even though you can do some really incredible things with it. That's their market. That's what they've chosen to kind of target.
Right.
And so you get like these timeline editor, like the moments or whatever that new feature that's coming out, the sequences. I have no interest in sequences, right? They might be, a little interesting at some point, but I've already solved that problem. I've already got my own way of doing these sort of things. And so those new features, they're great for somebody who is just starting and needs a way of doing these things, but that doesn't make my job as building a professional game to release to everyone any easier, really. So for me, I'm not frustrated because I'm not pushing the boundaries of GM, and maybe that'll change when I sit down to really release a game and I run into these bugs that I know a lot of professional devs are running into with like different refresh rates and things like that. So right now I love GM, right? I'm super invested in it. I'm not terribly tempted by Unity or any other, this is kind of my niche, and I'm happy to occupy the space that I'm in until I want more, I suppose.
And I will say, to YYG's credit, because the beta patch for 2.2.1 just came out, it was actually a very good, in my eyes, update. We didn't get a chance to go over the release notes, but there was a lot of bug fixes. That refresh rate error that you were mentioning has been fixed. There's been huge optimizations to the engine overall, specifically with textures and surfaces. So I personally, while I did share some of the frustrations you were talking about, I was encouraged a bit by this update, and I hope that the next updates following it kind of pick up on that pacing. Because to be fair, this has been the first major update since the YYG finished up 1.4 and the whole Switch export module. I think 2.2.0 was just a quick bug fix one, and then this one is, bigger changes and bigger optimizations coming up. So I'm happy to see how this update has gone, and I hope it continues like this.
I hope it continues. I think this is a sign of YYG redirecting resources that would have gone on to continue 1.4 development to improve 2.x. So yeah, definitely I hope to see more of this.
We have another question coming from Sean, who asks, where did the name Pixelated Pope come from? Which was also asked on our Twitter. Grace asks, how did His Holiness contract pixelitis and become pixelated?
Which we'll assume that means where does my name come from?
Where'd your name come from.
So, yeah, this is a really boring story, so I'll blitz through it pretty fast. When I was in high school, so we're looking at like 98, 99, and my friends found a website where you could get an email address at the domain at jesuslives.com, right? And growing up in Happy Valley, Utah, which is like one of the most religious places, like not just spiritual or like people who, this 99% Mormon during the 90s, right? It was crazy. So it was very edgy to have a at jesuslives.com email address, right? And so one of my friends was True Believer. One of my friends was Love at jesuslives.com. And I chose the Pope, right, at jesuslives.com, because that makes sense. So I was using that on message boards and forums. And so I had a whole bunch of avatars of like Pope John Paul II that I was using. And my dad got a new printer. I wanted to test it out. And so I printed out one of my my avatars, which was super low resolution, and so it came out super blurry and pixelated. And I handed the piece of paper to my dad and said, "There you go, a pixelated Pope." And it just kind of stuck, and I've been using it since about 99.
That's actually a pretty good story. That's a much better story than others I've heard regarding names. My story is just that I had a lazy eye when I was a child, and that's it. That's why my name is Lazy Eye. Let's see here. One question coming from Quello, who asked John, what inspired you to make your resolution management series?
I think that was just so many people had no idea what was going on with resolution and scaling. Like all the pieces that fit together to really build what displays in your game window. And it, like even... I think Yo-Yo even had an old tech blog about scaling for Android and things like that. And even that, like, I think I read that one like 9 or 10 times, like just didn't get it. And I didn't understand why we were dividing things by this number and multiplying things by this number. And it was so confusing that I just wanted there to be a definitive, this is not just how you do it, but why you do it. And so yeah, that was tons of research on my end, because again, when somebody says, "Will you write a tutorial on this?" and I think other tutorial makers like Sean and Cosmo can attest to this, when somebody says, "Will you do a tutorial on this?" it's the tutorial isn't, "Oh, I know how to do this 100%. Let me just record this real fast." They sit down and they do the research and they figure out how they would solve the problem, and then they create a tutorial from that. And so that's what I did. I just sat down and studied and messed. I had so many little temp projects that were like messing with the GUI size and the view size, the resolution of the application surface. Just how did all of these things interact, and how could that be explained better?
All right, and we'll take one last question coming from Nam, who asks, have you ever been asked to make tutorials over a concept that you yourself didn't fully understand?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all the time. Like, I have so many weak spots when it comes to Game Maker. Networking, my 3D game is super weak. Anything to do with, like, the Facebook, or even I did release one game on Android, not even supported by ads. It was just a silly little 5-minute game, and well, it took me like 6 months, but the idea was to make a game that could be completely experienced in 5 minutes. And but even like getting ads up in your Android or iOS game, so many, like, people are always asking for crazy random tutorials, like you do a tutorial on how to build a Castlevania game. It's just like, right. Wow, yeah, that would take a while. So
before I wrap us up on this episode, as we're coming up in the hour mark, Maseda, do we have a fun special secret question for John before we close out?
Not so much in that it's a secret at all anymore. This has become pretty much routine. John, you previously mentioned that you're on the keto diet, and I thought I'd like to ask this question. What kind of foods that are not on the keto diet that you miss?
That's actually a really easy question to answer. I gave up pretty much my top 3 foods to go, maybe even top 4 to go on keto. So sushi.
Oh, man.
I made sushi myself almost every Saturday for about 10 years.
Wow.
I am super into sushi. So that is pretty much completely given up. I have made some with cauliflower rice, and it wasn't bad, but obviously not the same. I try and avoid replacement foods. Pizza. I love pizza. Peanut butter toast. I love having just toast with peanut butter spread on it. Like, I love that stuff. So yeah, lots of foods that were given up. And I mean, given up is a strong word, right? I cheat occasionally. You need to. You can't tell yourself I am never going to have a slice of pizza or a slice of pie or a slice of cake or anything else that comes in slices.
I mean, that kind of makes sense because, you don't, I mean, I don't eat sushi every day. So if I had to, eat that once every few months, it's probably not bad.
Yeah, it's not.
Probably do that. Yeah. How much does that affect your diet if you cheat?
Not much. Like, it's all about self-control, right? It's just like, if you're going to cheat, don't go nuts, and just get back on it the next day. It doesn't feel too bad. If you're off it for months, that first week, we just did it. That first week is hell.
All right.
All right. Well, before we close out here today, John, is there anything that you want to plug or promote?
Well, yeah, keep an eye on my YouTube channel. Keep an eye on my Twitter at Pixelated Pope, and new videos coming soon. I'll definitely need a lot of feedback. And just as I'm playing with it's basically a full reset, right? I'm completely changing my format, and it's going to be rough, and I'll just need a little bit of help from the community at large to what am I doing right, what am I doing wrong, and kind of push forward and build something that's actually useful for people.
All right. Well, before we head out, we want to give a quick shout out to Friendly Cosmonaut, whose series that she announced on our podcast in partnership with Yo-Yo Games, a new tutorial series for beginners to intermediates in GameMaker, is now out on the Yo-Yo Games YouTube channel. We'll put the link in the description of the podcast, so be sure to check that out if you haven't. But other than that concludes this episode of Object Podcast. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us. John, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll catch you all next time.
Bye, everyone.
I recall specifically, I was transitioning between the tools and tutorials. I was like, I have no idea how to segue this. So it's just like, so YouTube's a thing.
I mean, that's sometimes what you have to do. You just kind of have to say, all right, we've been on this topic long enough. Let's talk about this
Well,
now.
the magic of Maseda is that no one who wasn't here today will ever know.
The thing is it feels like a abrupt transition, but literally I just cut out parts of the bit where you say that's interesting or this is a segue, and it sounds fine.
I said it so many times. Yeah, I couldn't help but mention it. I've been so conscious of it every episode, like, don't say interesting, and then I always catch myself saying it. It's the easiest way to segue into a thought rather than just flat out saying it. I'm sure if I just didn't say anything, I just said my thought, it would sound better.
No, it's fine because that's how it turns out in the edited version.
I just removed interesting.
Yeah, but I was saying if you read out the thesaurus entry for interesting in an audio file, I can go swap all of the words.
There we go. Okay, hold on.
No, don't do that. That's a lot of work.
No, I'm gonna do it.
No, it's gonna sound weird.
No, hold on. I got this. Hold up. Interesting. Okay. Here we go. Alluring, amusing, attractive, beautiful, compelling, curious, delightful, engaging, exotic, fascinating, impressive, intriguing, lovely. Please, there are so many words for interesting. Oh my god. I need to up my game.
I think what's more important is that you put the word "that"
Oh yeah, that's
in front of it.
That's alluring. That's striking. That's enticing. That's provocative. There we go. Lazy, I just say, well, that's a load of barnacles.
I'll just replace everything with that. Just all your responses is going to be the same.
Well, that's a load of barnacles. Yeah.